Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we're back this week with more Battle Action Force. That's right. If you're new to the show, this is the podcast where I've covered all of the Sunbow episodes, all of the Larry Hama Marvel comic books, all of the DIC, all of the extreme cartoons in order, watch along, read along style, and that's what we do on the show. We read along with you, so if it's something you're interested in, get your book out and listen to the show. We're going to go through it together. It's also the home of G.I. Columbo. It's the home of Frost Destro. It's the home of Cold Slither Behind the Rock. So we've been around, we've done a bunch of stuff, and I'm glad to hear you all coming back each week. It's so great. We actually recorded a dope interview for next week, so we're going to take a break from Action Force next week, so come on back for that for sure. No spoilers. Yeah, and you know what, while you're not searching for spoilers on the internet, why don't you reach out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe on Joe Pod. You can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And you can also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/joeonjoepod. And that really helps keep the show afloat, keeps the lights on, and so on and so forth. We're always doing You on Joe's, listeners. If you want to be a guest on the show, if you want to participate, that's what we got next week. We got a You on Joe coming up. It's all about you. It's about your favorite part of G.I. Joe, how G.I. Joe touches your life, how it's impacted your growth. And that's the premise of You on Joe. But this week we are doing Joe on Joe Illustrated. And the only thing I love doing more than doing a Joe on Joe Illustrated, quite frankly, is listening to our great sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Really should check them out. Give them a listen. I absolutely appreciate everything they do for us. Before we jump in to this week's Battle Action Force Annual, we're covering Annual 1987. So that's very exciting. I did get some cool J. Joe stuff this week. I got my shooter, my classified shooter. I got my Crimson Alley Viper. And then I got the, the mouse? What's his name? Mouse? Mole Rat. That's his name, Mole Rat. That Mole Rat character. It's like they saw the Range Vipers and they're like, how can we make them worse? That's a cool character, but like they're more horrific than Range Vipers. Also, Chuckles in the house. I can't remember if we mentioned that last week. Chuckles in the house. That's always exciting. Yeah. So I know we're getting closer to the launch of the G.I. Joe comic book. I don't really remember what day it is, but I'm excited. I'm stoked for it. And I think that's it for up-to-date stuff. So let's dig into it, ladies and gentlemen. The Fangs of Cobra. This is from the Battle Action Force Annual 1987. The cover is, it's a weird cover, to be honest. It's neat. It's got Duke up front. He's waving us on. It's got the big Action Force logo in the lower right. You got Roadblock and over the shoulder. Roadblock, he looks actually pretty cool. Duke and Roadblock look great. And then in the background, you got like a red wash look of all the G.I. Joes fighting in like one of those every vehicle in the picture with Sky Strikers and Fangs and Stingers and APCs, although at Action Force we learned they're ATCs. and there's Wakanda. So it's a lot of people going into action. It looks very much like those old puzzles, those 3-part puzzles, where you just draw every vehicle attacking the beach all at once, kind of a thing. It's got Battle Action Force Annual 1987 across the top. It's got the Cobra logo, that cool Cobra logo with just the word Cobra in the middle and the snake kind of wrapped around it. It really looks like a place you would get your gasoline from, like an oil company in the 1970s. Yeah, I guess I say it's weird because I don't know. It doesn't pop out. It doesn't pop forward. It pops left and right. I guess that's why I think it's weird. I think some of the most memorable covers pop forward, and this is Duke's looking off to the side, Roadblock's looking off to the other side. Planes are, this guy's going that way. That guy's going that way. The guy's going on what? It's a couple of dogs. And the Sky Strikers are coming in from one direction. The Fangs are coming in from the other direction. I think that's what's throwing me off about this. So it's certainly not bad. Actually, I like the way Duke and Roadblock are rendered. Really, they're pretty good. Like even Roadblock's gun is accurate, and Duke's gun actually looks really accurate too, from what I can see. To his toy gun. I think that's it. I think it's because it's not forward facing. Even the last one last week with like the Cobra Commander coming right at you and Snake Eyes coming at you and Scarlet coming at you. There's nothing coming at you. Everything's avoiding you on this cover. So that's my take. It's nice though. I don't hate it. Again, we go into the Action Force where they don't waste any time. They don't waste paper. The interior of the hardcover has a part of the story printed on it. So they knew what they were doing. They were like, we ration. We know all about rationing from the war over here in Europe. So we are rationing our paper. And it is the Fangs of Cobra. This is a very brutally violent and just a story about killing people. I gotta be honest. This is not a there's no moral to this. There's no master plan. There's certainly no twist. It is a story about Cobra blowing up stuff and killing people, and G.I. Joe showing up and killing Cobra. And I say kill, I mean kill. And there's not a lot to it. So story-wise, not a huge fan. But I love the art. The colors are great. There's I don't know if it's watercolor or if they used marker, but it's like a watercolor wash feel to the colors, and it's cool. They're spotty. They don't the inks define the images, but where there's places in this where in a US book they would have used the colors to define some of the art where the line work was missing. And they don't do that in these Action Force books. I've noticed that before. And it's really evident in this, literally in the second panel. So it opens in the National Bank in the capital of the small African country of Adana, A-D-A-N-A. It seems quiet and peaceful, certainly. But then the next panel, they just get right to it. It's under attack by Cobra. Major Bludd is there. There's Cobra troopers with rocket launchers. They're attacking the bank. Now this is right away, third panel. There's all these Adanians coming out of the bank. They give them the word balloon of don't shoot, I'm assuming they're going to say we surrender or we're unarmed. And they're getting gunned down right away. Major Bludd says destroy them. They didn't come out when they had the chance, so now they must die. That's super sinister. And so now they're stealing all the cash from it in the next panel. They're all marching out of the bank. And Major Bludd is contemplating there'll be enough left over to line some of his pockets because, he is a mercenary. So that's on character. I like that. But like as he's thinking this, you get a word balloon out of nowhere saying you better not be thinking about taking some of it. Now, before we flip the page, if you go up to the second panel, this is what I'm talking about. The bank, there's an explosion in the front door. And so they rendered the explosion. They didn't really render like the base of the bank, where literally the ground would meet the building. And so you get a a white, uncolored like white, looks like smoke that kind of rolls into the ground, but it's really just them not coloring the dirt in order to give it a like it focuses the image based on the color that's not there, right? Where I would say in a traditional comic, if the artist didn't actually render the bottom of the bank, they would have brought the brown of the street. They would have brought that up just to butt onto the bank, and then the whatever color the bank looks like, it's kind of a light yellow wash. It's not pure white. They would have brought that down to meet the, you know what I mean? Like it would have been defined by the colors instead of just by the pen and ink. So they don't do that here, and they don't do that. There's a few places throughout this story that they don't do that. Again, I can't really tell if it's marker or watercolor. I feel like, especially for the time, I feel like it's probably watercolor, or at least the backgrounds are watercolor, which gives it a cool look in some places. I dig it. All right, so turn the page. So the Baroness pulls up in her stinger, and they don't call it a stinger. They call it a it's called sorry for this. Let's see. Oh, they call it a night attack jeep. That's all they refer to it as over at Action Force. But for us, it's a stinger. And she pulls up and she's just like, now that you've completed your small part of this mission, now it's time for you to learn the real reason for our coming here. It's to get new recruits. So they had him break into a bank and murder people. But the real reason they're in Adana is to capture these Adanians and recruit them to Cobra. Like there's a weird, what's the word? Colonizer. That's the word I'm searching for. It's a real colonizer element to this. Cobra's going to sweep into this African town and just recruit people. So Major Bludd says, you expect me to turn that rabble into a fighting force. And Baroness doesn't. Cobra Commander does. And apparently succeed, or Cobra Commander is going to have him killed. They're gathering all the people from the city in the town square in just an hour. And the Major Bludd says, there's a lot of people in this town square, right? So it's full of people. There are a lot of native Adanians in this town square. He says, this is all I could find. The rest have fled. And the Baroness basically says, if I were in charge of Cobra, I would have killed you for such a failure. Like the failure being what? I happen to gather a completely full town square, but a couple people escaped. Baroness is hardcore. Not only are they murdering people hardcore, but the Baroness is really running a tight ship. This is the kind of Baroness that would eventually take over when it gets to the IDW years, I gotta say. So she's yelling at them. It's the next page. People of Adana, the Cobra organization, it's your new master. You are honored with you to join us in the struggle that'll one day result in us taking over the world. And these Adanians are great. They're like, forget it. We're not going to fight for scum like you. And Cobra, the Baroness shoots him dead. She doesn't miss a beat. She pulls out her pistol, kills this guy. Now, we didn't know this, but apparently Roadblock and Duke from the cover are there in mufti, as Larry would have said at one point. They're in hiding. It's two members of Action Force. So Duke says, our mission's got to start now before this gets out of hand. So he says, I've only got to say 6 words and Action Force will move. Let the mongoose kill the Cobra. I love the idea of code words. I love the whole idea, but like that's pretty on the nose. And I guess if anyone's listening, if that's the go signal, it doesn't really matter. They're going to go anyway. But like, saying, hey, let's kill Cobra, and possibility that Cobra is over listening, I feel like that's it gives up the game a little bit, I guess. So in the outskirts, it's what we call an APC, but they call it an ATC. And I think it's an armored transport carrier or something like that. A little bit different. And there's an ATC, and the Joes are like, all right, we're going. And nearby, we have, now remember, we're in an African nation. Africa is, this is a tropical climate, possibly desert. There's a lot of dust here, but definitely hot. And we have a fully clothed, with his hood up and his ski goggles on, gloves, shirt down to his wrists, snow job. He's part of this operation, and he has not changed clothing. He is as Snow Job gets. And I love it, because they're even like, we're behind you, Snow Job, and we're ready for action. It's in his name that his name is Snow Job, and he's not dressed for Africa. All right, on to the next page. Major Bludd points out that none of these people are cooperating. I don't know what they want them to cooperate with at this point. She says, execute a couple. I guess they're just not going willingly. Like they're, maybe not, maybe they're just resisting. But Baroness says, execute a couple more of the dogs. That'll make the rest change their minds. And they choose a couple beggars in the crowd to kill. But without recognizing it, they actually chose Duke and Roadblock. And those two show up and murder people. So now we've got like 4 dead Cobra troops that they just, mow down in close counters. Does this make the Baroness and Major Bludd buckle down and fight the Joes harder? No. It makes the Baroness attack Major Bludd. She blames him for Action Force penetrating the city, which she then, punches him out, says your security arrangements are terrible. You could still redeem yourself. Order all of our troops into the city center to crush Action Force easily. And Major Bludd points out, if we do that, then all the approaches to the city will be left unguarded. And she draws a gun on Major Bludd. Like this is the classic example of Cobra shooting themselves in their own foot. No pun intended. They can't work together to solve a problem or to finish a mission, or something goes haywire. They always turn on each other, and isn't that the ultimate lesson of Cobra? Even when Larry writes it or on the cartoon, they always turn on each other, and there's just you're never going to win with literal snakes who just stab people in the back. That is the absolute lesson of this singular issue. Not much happens otherwise, but that is the lesson, that people who are just terrible like this are never going to win. Roadblock and Duke, they're probably out of ammo because now they're swinging their guns like baseball bats, cracking Cobra soldiers in the face. The ATC now catches up here, and they are mowing people down with that hot roof turret. I was a big fan of the APC. I always call it the APC, but I was a big fan of that toy. I liked it a lot. And what they're doing, they're using the front as a battering ram. I got to be fair. I don't ever remember seeing the APC or ATC get used as a battering ram like this in the comics. It was always just a troop transport kind of thing. They use it here to completely ram the Stinger, destroying it. And if you think about it, the way the APC front was built, it's great for a battering ram. More of that, please. I kind of liked seeing it in action like this. That was really I know it's a low profile, low action toy, but I really loved the APC growing up. And then, so final page of this. Here's Snow Job mowing people down. Give them heck, laddies. He's murdering Cobra troopers. A Cobra Claw is come flying in. Now remember, Cobra Claws are one-man transport vehicles, right? They're at the most probably 15 feet across, at the most. And there is one zeroing in on them. He's got the drop on him. But before then, an entire F-14 Sky Striker comes flying in and blows it out of the sky with a rocket. That's awesome overkill, and I'm here for it. They get him caught in a crossfire. All the Cobras surrender. Cobra isn't worth dying for, they say. Duke says, you said it, bud. Not blood, but bud. Now drop those guns and reach for the sky. So the Battle of Adana was over. All the Cobra troops are accounted for except 2, so the Baroness and Major Bludd. And Duke thought as much. Those snakes have given us the slip again. One day they won't be so lucky. That's it. That's the adventure. It's super toyetic. A lot like one of the previous ones we covered, where there's a lot of attention to detail on the toy. There's a lot of action being done with the toys on the toys. It's not really about the character stuff. It's really about, let's show these toys in action. Let's show the Sky Striker, which actually, to be fair, is drawn really nice. And on this last page, they do a nice thing, which they haven't really done a ton. I guess in this one they did a little bit. Remember, if you were listening last week, we talked about how they've, some of those, they did a lot of odd and awkward looking panels, but they really broke it up nicely, and it just was a different style. They're doing some of that this week, not a ton, but they're doing some of that this week. But what they're also doing with this Sky Striker, and they haven't done a lot, is they haven't broken the pane of the border, right? They haven't really gotten into the gutters with any of the characters, but they do break it a couple times. When the Baroness shoots that native Adanian guy, his arm breaks the border, which really is impactful because he's getting killed. When the Baroness slugs out Major Bludd, her head pops the top of the border. Same thing with Roadblock in the previous one, the previous panel. And then on this last page, the Sky Striker breaks the plane on two different panels. Both the top of the fin, tail fin, and the wing, the right wing, breaks the panel below it, which does a couple things. One, visually, it just brings you, it moves this page. It just brings you down, right? The Sky Striker looks almost 3D, and it looks almost, it just moves your eyes down the page, which is always nice. And then storytelling wise, the introduction all of a sudden of a giant F-14 shooting missiles really just overpowers everything, and that's what this does by having it break out of the panel. So that's a nice touch, and it's a really great rendering. I like it. I'm not sure again if it's it could be. It really does feel like a watercolor, which is neat. It gives it a nice color. So that's it. That's it for the Fangs of Cobra. Now, next week we do have a great interview, which I think you're all going to love. And then we'll be back the following week for another story from this specific annual that we're going to cover. Again, just like last week, there's like 3 Joe pieces, and then there's some Joe insert stuff, which before we go today, there is a Joe insert with a Duke's Tough Test, which these are some trivia questions. So I'll ask it. You guys answer it. So we'll see if you guys know the answers to it. And then I'll give you a couple of seconds, then we'll give you the answers. Well, what do we do? Let's not make it too complicated. All right. Anyway, name this Cobra high-speed all-terrain vehicle, and it is the Cobra Hiss, right? But do they call it an Action Force? Do they call it the Hyena, the Jackal, or the Wolf? What do they call the Cobra Hiss tank in Action Force? The Hyena, the Jackal, or the Wolf? The answer is it's the Hyena. That's what the Hiss tank is called in Action Force. Now, the Armored Troop Carrier, which is our APC, their ATC, is a powerful vehicle that can carry a large Action Force squad. It's also amphibious, able to travel over water. True or false? We all know that's true. Because we used to play with it in the bathtub. I certainly did. Torpedo. The expert swimmer of Action Force was trained as a SEAL specialist. What does SEAL stand for? The answer is not self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, although it should be. Of course, it stands for sea, air, and land. Now, Cobra mercenary Major Bludd has an unusual hobby. Is it photography, stamp collecting, or writing poetry? I'm happy to report in both our world and in the Action Force world, he's a terrible poet. So he's a terrible poet in both worlds. That hasn't changed. All right, next question. Cobra Commander is the world's most dangerous enemy. Originally, in the Action Force world, he was another evil terrorist before converting himself into the Cobra leader and known as Count Steel, Baron Ironblood, or Prince Iron Fist. Listeners, we covered this in the very first Action Force episode we did about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So if you're a regular listener, you might know this. Also, if you're a big G.I. Joe fan, you also might know this. But the answer, of course, is Baron Ironblood. Now, we're talking about a Cobra Claw here. It says, name the missiles that arm the Cobra Claw flying machine. Are they called Serpents, Venoms, or Stings? Is in the Action Force world. They're called Venoms. And number 7, which Action Force member drives the Wolverine? Now remember, it's not CoverGirl. Is it Ton Up, Deep Six, or Tripwire? And if you know who Ton Up is, I'll give you a bonus point. The answer is Ton Up. He drives the Wolverine, and Ton Up is really rock and roll from the G.I. Joe team. All right, last question. Gung Ho is one of the strongest Action Force fighters. What is Gung Ho's specialty? Is he an Arctic patrol, bomb disposal, or jungle warfare? This is Gung Ho of the Action Force, not Gung Ho of the G.I. Joe team. Is he a specialist in Arctic, bomb disposal, or jungle? The answer is jungle. They made him a jungle expert. So I guess in the U.S. he's a Marine. Hold on, I got my file cards right here. Let's see if they gave him a jungle. To be honest, I don't know if that's a change. It sounds not right. It doesn't sound right. Let's see, Gung Ho, Marine. Jungle warfare. That's interesting. So his first military specialty was Wakanda, and his second military specialty was jungle warfare. So they carried that over from his file card. Fabulous. That's fascinating. So that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this week's Action Force. And I certainly did. I'm enjoying these. This is, again, from the 87 annual. We've still got a few more annuals to go. They're all pretty available on eBay if you want to check them out. So that's it. I hope everyone has a great G.I. Joe week. And now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.